Welcome to the gender reveal party. I'm Jay Pryor. Hi. Wow, hi everybody. I'm Jay Pryor and I'm your host. Now, some of you may have attended a gender reveal party in the past. A gender reveal party is usually when a human being is about to give birth to another human being. And they have a party, and usually they have a cake. And when they cut that cake open, it's either pink inside or blue inside. And that cake is supposed to represent the genitals. Yes, folks, it represents the genitals of that child. Those parties are genital reveal parties. So, if you came here for genitals, you're in the wrong place. However, I would not be surprised because every trans person knows what you really want to know is what's in my pants. So I'll tell you. It's 1966 and I'm about to come on the scene. Let me tell you what I'm being born into. My town was 1 square mile big. My dad was one of 2 grocers in town, and in his grocery store was a butcher shop. So he's the groceryman and the butcher, and he happens to be the mayor, run uncontested for ultimately over 30 years. If I can give you a reference, you might think of Andy Taylor. Remember how in Mayberry, anytime anybody needed anything, they'd just call Andy? Well, in my town, anytime anybody needed anything, they'd just call my dad. So he's Andy, and I'm Opie. Only I have 8 siblings, 4 boys and 4 girls. I broke the tie. Sort of. They looked at my genitals and they called me Janet. Genitals female, gender identity, little girl. Now, it wasn't very long before I was tomboying all over the place. I remember vividly the conversations that went like, "Hey, you guys are going hunting? I want to go hunting." "You can't go hunting." "Why can't I go hunting?" "'Cause you're a girl." "Hey, you guys are playing football. I want to play football." "You can't play football." "Why can't I play football?" "Because you're a girl." I'll fight him. I remember this one big time. I wanted more than anything to get put up against somebody. See, there was this culture in my town where the older boys would choose who of the younger boys they wanted to see fight. It was kind of like the first fight club. And I wanted more than anything to get put up against somebody. I'll fight him. But it was in 3rd grade before they finally put me up against Bobby Joe. And I knew when they put me up against Bobby Joe that they were doing it to humiliate him. And I knew that there was nothing worse for a boy to get a whooping by a girl. But I also did not mind doing the whooping. I loved to fight. I loved Army, and I loved to play football. Genitals female, gender identity, tomboy. Now remember, while I'm doing all this tomboying, I'm also being classically trained female. Classically trained female. Now, honey, don't sit like that. You have to be more ladylike. Classically trained female. Now, Janet, get in here and do those dishes. But Mom, the boys are watching football, and you're not a boy. You get in here and do those dishes. Classically trained female. So things are going along pretty good until about 6th grade. In 6th grade, all my friends came back to school, and I swear they had been taken over by aliens. The summer before, they had their shirts off and they were playing football right alongside me. And now, all of a sudden, they've come to school and they're all wearing bras and they're carrying purses. And in those purses is makeup. And all they can talk about is who's already started their period or who's going to. Because according to one of the moms, you weren't a woman until you started your period. Now, to make matters worse, in the middle of that year, my mom decides it's time for me to get a bra because apparently these things need to be trained. And I find myself I find myself in the middle of J.C. Penney's getting a bra strapped around me. It was mortifying. Most importantly, it solidified a conversation that I had already started to have with myself called "Something is wrong with me." I mean, I wasn't starting my period, and more importantly, I was clueless. It just seemed like everybody else got the joke. I was still hitting boys to see who had the toughest punch. So all the way through 6th grade, no period. 7th grade, nope. I used to have this sister that would like to come home, and when she did, she would beg me to let me put makeup on my face, and I would tell her no, and no, and no. Finally, I'd give in. She'd put makeup on my face. When she was done, my whole family would gather around, and they'd say, "Oh, isn't she pretty?" Because when I do her eyeliner, my eyes do pop. But it certainly didn't feel like me. Then all the way through 8th grade, no period. My freshman year, all the way through until, "Welcome, sweet springtime, we sing thee." Yeah, I was in algebra class. I don't know how I knew, I just knew. Maybe it was women's intuition. As I walked into the restroom to take care of it, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. See, it was a very particular day. It was my first forensics tournament, and my mom had sewed me a new suit. It was one of those straighter down skirts with a blazer, kind of like a men's suit coat, and with a white button-down shirt underneath it. It was the most masculine clothing I had ever seen myself in. I looked good, and I was feeling studly until I started my period. Genitals female, gender identity, woman. Now, remember, this young woman is also still being classically trained female. By the time I was 13 years old, I was babysitting 4 kids, ages 2, 4, 5, and 8. Not only were all of those children tucked away in bed by the time their parents came home, but the house was picked up and tidy. Classically trained female. And by this age, I had at least 3 recipes memorized, casseroles that could all feed at least 10 people, all of them made with Campbell's cream of mushroom soup. Classically trained female. I should also mention that this was around the time that another girl kissed me. See, I'd been kissing boys since I was in 6th grade. It was kind of exciting. It was okay. But when this girl kissed me, I swear to you, my head exploded. It was like fireworks went off, like in the movies. I'm telling you, I had this moment where it was like, oh my God, that's what's wrong with me. I'm gay. And then I thought, fuck, I can't be gay. Opie can't be gay. No way. Did I mention the big family, the big Catholic family? I can't be gay. So I doubled down on Jesus. I'm not kidding you. I tried to pray the gay away every night. When I had saw The Exorcist, for example, I slept with a rosary around my neck for 3 weeks because I figure if possession is real, I am next. I figure I'm bordering on mental illness and definitely going straight to hell. Now, unfortunately, that sent me through high school doing a bunch of alcoholic drinking and promiscuous behavior to try to prove that I was straight and suicidal ideation. My junior year of high school, I drove my parents' car 100 miles an hour down a country road, and I flipped it with every intention to end my life. 2 years of suicidal ideation later, my siblings got wind of what was going on with me, and they admitted me to a psychiatric unit. Now that was the best thing that ever happened to me for a couple of reasons, but for this story, it's where I met my first Butch Dyke. I'll never forget it. I was standing up at the med station waiting to get my meds, and I heard the elevator door ding, and I turned around to look, and Fonzie stepped out of the elevator. I'm not kidding. She had black boots on and black jeans. She had a white t-shirt with her sunglasses clipped right there. She had a motorcycle jacket on and a helmet under her arm. She looked both ways and started walking, and I just followed her. She was on the unit to visit her partner who was dealing with depression, and I got to spend some time with that lesbian couple, and that woman is the first person that ever said to me, "Kid, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just gay." Just gay? Are you kidding me? You mean I'm not bordering on mental illness? I'm not going straight to hell? Well, that's a game changer. So I kicked down the closet door and I came out. Genitals female, gender identity, butch, dyke. You see, I didn't like the word lesbian because dyke was tougher. Seriously. Now, if you were a lesbian in the 80s or 90s, there were these bookstores called women's bookstores. That's WOMYN. And they had feminist music and books that mainstream America just didn't even have. And a town I moved to, we had one of those bookstores. So I got all my courage up, and I walked through the door, and again there was a bell. And someone said, "Hey, who's the new baby Butch?" And I was home. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged with these people. They were my people. It was kind of like my real first puberty. The older femmes used to love to tease me because they could just barely flirt with me and my face would go bright red. There was this one femme that I had this huge crush on. She was so beautiful. When I'd walk, she would take my arm. It made me feel like I was 10 feet tall. She used to call me Jay. And one day, she wrote it in a note, spelled it out, J-A-Y. And I've been Jay ever since. There weren't very many of us, but we would get together, we'd have potlucks, and we would watch the only movie called Desert Hearts. It was this old B lesbian movie that we could rent from over and over and over again. And then in 1990, when the movie The Hunger came out, and Catherine Deneuve made out with Susan Sarandon, oh my God, that was hot. So things were pretty good for me. And then in 1990, my dad got sick. And essentially on my dad's deathbed, he asked me to get my education. And I'd tried to do university in the past, but my biology class was bigger than my whole town. It freaked me out. Not to mention the fact that every butch lesbian I know didn't have a higher education. We all were blue-collar workers. We were working in factories like that. But my dad asked me to get my education. So I figured that I probably needed to fem up a little bit. So I grew my hair out. I asked my sister for some makeup tips. And I donned a power suit, you know, with the padded shoulders, blazer, and a skirt. And I started at KU. Janet Pryor started at KU. Butch undercover, power lesbian. Now, it was right off the bat, I got involved in the gay student organization. And since you're local, I should give you a little history, you know, that here in Lawrence, we have the third oldest gay student organization in the country. It was BYU, Berkeley, Lawrence, Kansas. Yeah, that's pretty cool, huh? Yeah. So we have this rich tradition of educating campus about our community. We would go into Psych 101 classes, and we'd take 2 lesbians and 2 gay men, and we'd tell our coming out stories and let them ask us questions. And I'd say, "Hi, my name is Janet. I'm a lesbian, and now you know one." Because people honestly believed they did not know any gay or lesbian people. And I found that when I told my story, it made a huge difference. Yes, it made a difference on educating people, but the people it made a difference the most for were the queer youth. I remember after telling my story on Wesco Beach, I was out at a bar one night, and a young woman ran into me, and she said, "Hey, you're Janet Pryor." And I said, "Yeah?" And she said, "I heard you tell your story in front of the whole campus today, and I decided if you could do that, then I could come out to my mom." And I decided right then and there that I was going to keep telling my story until I can work myself out of business. Now, note, it's 35 years later, and I'm still telling this story. In 1995, a group of us went down to the Gay and Lesbian Task Force Conference in Dallas, Texas. And I was so honored to be there as a student activist. Now remember, this is the 90s, so every single woman was wearing Doc Marten boots, jeans, and flannel shirts. You couldn't tell the farm girls from the lesbians. And I hadn't seen a woman in a skirt in a really long time. And I go to this dance, and across the dance floor comes the hottest smokingest femme I've ever seen in my life. She wasn't wearing Doc Marten boots. And I may have my self-esteem issues, but I've never had trouble stepping to the ladies. So I stepped, she stepped, and we had a lovely weekend. Somewhere in that weekend, she said to me, "Hey, what's with the long hair and the makeup, and aren't you a butch?" And I said, "I am a butch, but I just thought I had to. I mean, by this time, Katie Lang was on the scene, and we all knew what she was constantly craving, but she still had a padded shoulders in her jacket and eyeliner on. I'm pretty sure she's not wearing that at home. We have to do what we have to do to be safe." And this woman told me that, "I don't think it's you." And she sent me a book called Stone Butch Blues. Now that book changed my life in two ways. Number one, it reminded me I'm not alone. There's people that are like me out there. And number two, I'm being completely inauthentic in my self-expression right now. So I threw out all my women's clothes, and I cut my hair, and I went back to being called J. Genitals female, gender identity, back to butch. Now you notice in that picture I'm in a suit. I wore that suit to my niece's wedding, and it was the first time I had ever showed up in front of my whole family in a men's suit. In the past, they'd have to take me out to buy me a dress, because I certainly didn't own one. I had a girlfriend who was sort of internet savvy, and she got me on a listserv with a bunch of other butches and femmes and trans people. And she and I went down to Dallas for our first Butch Femme gathering. And once again, I was home. I mean, these were my people. And some of the butches were even going by he, him pronouns, and they were using the word transgender. So I came back to Lawrence, and I got butchered. When I had this face on, one of my biggest concerns was using the restroom. You see, when you have this face on, women are scared of you. They decide that you don't know how to read. It's dangerous for you. I'm not kidding you. So after all this, I decide I need to get myself out of Kansas. So I organized my life to leave town. It's my last night in town, and some coworkers had taken me out for drinks. There was this guy, a really big guy, who had been talking to some of my female coworkers, and I'd talked to him, and I didn't think we had any beef. But as the bar filled up and the alcohol started flowing, at some point he did this to me, and I leaned in, and bam, he punched me right in the face. And I stumbled back, and I picked up a pool cue, because I'm third grade fight club. I'm gonna whoop his ass. I'm ready. I don't care how big he is. But my friend jumped up and said, "What did you hit her for?" And he looked at her, and he looked back at me, and it dawned on him that he just punched a woman square in the face. He fell to his knees, and he started sobbing like a baby. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I can't just whoop up on somebody with a pool cue and he's laying there crying. So I threw my pool cue down and I left. But for me, that was the beginning of a lot of powerful lessons about how the world treats men and women differently. See, it was totally okay with him to punch me in the face if he thought I was a guy. It was even more okay with him to punch me in the face if he thought that I was a fag. But you do not punch a woman in the face, at least not in public. So, I got myself out of Kansas and I moved to Washington, D.C. And right off the bat, I got involved with a group of guys who were all like me. They had all been assigned female at birth, but didn't resonate with that gender. And it was a support group. And as the weeks went on, they would show up and they'd had their breasts removed, or they were growing in a beard, or, they'd started testosterone. And frankly, I got jealous. So back to therapy I go. And I worked it out with my therapist. Down to two main issues was my fear of transitioning. The first one was my family. I was the first one out the closet in my family, and I'd already put them through a lot. I thought, they're going to freak out if I do this. But then I figured with good communication, and I'll just come home all the time, and we can work it out. But the second one was, I was afraid of losing my dyke card. See, I knew as soon as I started on testosterone and started looking more like a man, and I date femme women, that I'm just going to be taken as a regular old straight person. And that wasn't necessarily okay with me. So I decided that I would just have to be the most out trans genderqueer person that ever existed. So April 1st, 2001, I took my first shot of testosterone. Genitals female, gender identity, gender queer. Now let me be clear about this. Never one time did I have an intention to be a man. You see, it was important to me that people understood I was genderqueer, but the only people who knew that word was the queer community. In the mainstream world, no one had ever heard of anybody like me. But it was important to me to understand that I had one foot in woman. There was only one other genderqueer that was like me, and that was my friend Sean, not to be confused with my other friend Sean or my other 3 trans guy friends named Sean. But I identified as a genderqueer. Boy, once I started on testosterone, the very first thing you notice is all of a sudden there's these images and thoughts, sex images. It's really weird and kind of hard to explain. My friend Nick described it like someone tapping on your shoulder. It's like tap, 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 sexual thought, tap, 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 sexual image, tap, 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 sexual thought. It's very distracting and hard to manage. And I'm not saying that men shouldn't be held accountable for themselves, but I'm telling you, this stuff is hard to manage. It's one of the things that concerns me about having men in political power places. They're so hormonal. So the next thing that becomes very obvious on testosterone, I'm not gonna lie, it's clit growth. So you may not understand this, but guys, guess what? You started out female. Everybody does. Yep, we start out as the superior race. In utero, everybody starts out as female until that Y chromosome comes in, and then the little clitoris grows into a penis, and the labia majora turn into a little ball sack. So when a female human-bodied person goes on testosterone, it grows. So it looks like this, but it feels like this. And while I don't have to put a book in front of me, it can be very uncomfortable, like, whoa, and hey. So now I've got all this big clit energy going. And the lesbian feminist in me is going crazy. I remember talking to one of my salespeople, and she's talking to me, and my eyes keep going down to her chest, and I'm like, stop it, stop it. I did not want to be one of those guys. Then comes the physical changes. Seriously, it seemed like they happened slow, and then it seemed like all at once. I woke up one day and there was no hair here, and it was on my ass. My wife is bisexual. She dated guys. I was like, honey, what's with... She's like, men have hairy asses. It's not a big deal. I'm like, but should I be able to grab that? That's uncomfortable. The next thing I really noticed is the privilege. Oh my gosh, the privilege. I used to work in the furniture industry. I'd go into these construction guys just coming off of a meeting, and I'd say, guys, we have to order some more product because we're going to move 2 cubes into 3, and we have to move the electrical whip over here. And every single time they would say, okay, but we need to check with the electrician, and we need to check with the GC. I just thought that's how it was until I grew a beard and I started going into the same guys, and I'd say, guys, we got to change 2 cubes into 3. We're going to move the electrical whip. And they'd say, you betcha, Chief, we're right on it. I was shocked. I used to mantra to myself, I'm a man, I'm a man, I'm a man, so that I didn't look so shocked when everything I said, they took me as an expert. It was unbelievable. And then, when I started hanging out with this young woman, boy, she'd always been with women too. So us experiencing heterosexual privilege was unbelievable. Everybody is for you. It's really weird. In 2003, I had my chest surgery. I've had my breast removed and my chest reconstructed. And it was pretty much one of the best days I've ever had in my life. Recently, there was a study done where they surveyed over 100 trans men and non-binary people who've had their breasts removed. 100% of us had 0 regrets. 0 regrets. It was pretty much the best day of my life until the day that I got to marry that beautiful young woman. And then I've got this gender-affirming role of husband. Now, I'm still a genderqueer as far as I'm concerned, and it's still really important for people to understand that I have 1 foot in woman. I mean, come on. I cut my teeth on women-only spaces, lesbian potlucks. My go-to karaoke song was, I am woman, hear me roar, and numbers too big to ignore, and I know too much to go back and pretend. Yeah, thanks. So here I am getting all this privilege, and so I'm just coming out over. You might meet me 5 minutes, and I would come out to you. I'd come out over and over and over again. But it didn't matter because 5 minutes later, you'd forget. I'd come out to you, and 5 minutes later, I'd talk about wearing a pink taffeta dress to my prom, and you'd be aghast. So I came out over and over again, and people forgot, and they forgot, and they forgot, and they forgot, until now we're in my mom's living room. My brother and I were visiting her from Washington, D.C. She's in her chair watching Oprah, and Dr. Oz is on. Boys, get in here. You need to see this. What's going on, Mom? This doctor says you need to get your prostate checked every year. Are you getting your prostate checked? Mom, I don't have prostate. I have ovaries. Oh my God, I forgot. That's right, even my own mother, which meant that whether I liked it or not, I was an undercover white guy. And when you got that face, what are you gonna do? Around this time, we moved back to Kansas, and my wife and I started creating our family. And we left behind a huge trans and queer community. And now, we're building a community, but we're hanging out with a lot of straight people. And, heterosexuals are some of my best friends. But the het lag can get intense. Especially when you never can remember that I am still classically trained female. And man, when you've got this, all of a sudden I look like this, I'm deeply undercover. Men immediately just say things to you they'd never say in the past. I'll never forget the day that a guy said to me, did you see the tits on that woman? And I said, are you talking to me? And he said, oh, you're gay. And I said, yeah. Or guys just talk to you about engines or sports or mechanics, and they just act like you should know these things. I'm a show choir girl. I don't know. Then I'm out speaking and talking and sharing myself, and they, them pronouns started to come out, and the word non-binary started to exist. And I can't tell you how grateful and thankful I am to the younger generation for creating this word that is me. So I'm out there speaking, and I'm talking about how I don't fit into your pink box or your blue box, and I step off the stage and I realize I gotta come out again. It's time for me to come out. I've always been, I'm the OG genderqueer. I've always been genderqueer, but I need to use the word non-binary, and I want to start using they, them pronouns. And at the same time, the Me Too movement happened to hit. I remember my Me Too stories, and all my trans friends and all the women I know are remembering their Me Too stories. And the lesbian feminist in me feels like I've been in a fog. It's time to go off testosterone. So, 2018, I took my last shot of testosterone. I was a beast. You want to get by now, my beard is so thick that I can shave in the morning and I just go, "Ah!" And by the afternoon, I've got a beard. My skin is thick and I'm hairy everywhere. Going off testosterone, the doctors told me that my ovaries were atrophied when I went through puberty as a boy when I went on testosterone. What do doctors know about women's bodies? It wasn't 60 days off testosterone when, welcome sweet springtime, we greet you with song. Yeah, so I'm like, well, I'm already in my 50s. Like, it can't last that long, right? That next week, I was in an energy worker's office, and she's running her hands over my ovaries, and she's like, Jay, your ovaries are all fluffy and nice. I'm like, are you telling me I put those bitches on ice? Am I gonna bleed till I'm 90? Like, what the? Damn. Not to mention how intense it is to change a tampon, let alone find one in the men's room. I was super paranoid, because every single woman knows the sound of a tampon opening, but do guys? So every time I'd do it, I'd cough over it. Then when I'd go out, sometimes you get blood on your hands, and I used to have this fear fantasy that I'd be, washing my hands, and some guy'd be like, what's with the blood? And I'd be like, my period. Now, I'm in my mid-50s, and I'm an out gender queer. And now, my gender-affirming roles, my oldest has started to call me Maddie, which is mom daddy. And my wife calls me husband. And that feels just right to me. And if I shave my beard down really close, I hear those old words that I used to hear. Is that a boy or a girl? Only now, I'm climbing on the back of 60, so it's, is that a man or a woman? Is that a man or a woman? Is that a man or a woman? Both. Thank you very much. But if I put on my beard even just a little bit, it's yes, sir, no, sir, and how do you do, sir? And let me tell you something. It's a little weird being undercover and getting yes, sir, no, sir, while I'm having a hot flash. Now, I have to be careful not to say it too loud, because if I do, I might start to have a hot flash. So I'm kind of like my old lesbian self now. My wife is also perimenopausal, and we, every single night, try to figure out which one of us is going to sweat the bed. Even if it's 30 degrees outside, we've got the window open and the fan going, and we're kicking off the covers. God. But it feels just right to me. So the reality is, folks, I do not fit into one of your boxes. I'm a non-binary, genderqueer, and I use they, them pronouns. And boy, I really appreciate that some of you are trying to dial that in. Because you see what happens when you don't use the right pronoun, and trust me, I get misgendered like 100 times a day. And every single time I notice, sometimes I'll call you out on it or ask you about it. Sometimes I'll just ignore it. What's most important is if you misgender me or anybody, any of us, please just say, sorry, Jay, and move on. Don't stand there and be like, oh my gosh, Jay, I'm so sorry. I just can't get this right. Because then I have to take care of you. And you just might put me in danger. So please, here's how you can do this. You could go home tonight and you could tell all your friends, gosh, I saw this show. And Jay, they are so good. You could go home and write a note and tell everybody, that gender reveal party, Jay Pryor, they really got it going on. You could just sit and write great things about me all day and use they, them pronouns. And you will have practiced because it takes practice. It really, really does. So before I go, I want to give a huge shout out to the GOP, the good old politicians. You see, you may not know this, but this is not my day job. In my day job, I'm a life coach, and I've been coaching people for over 20 years. And I have my undergraduate degree in interpersonal communication studies. And I've been studying human beings since I was that kid in the psychiatric unit. And one thing I know about human beings is that you can't hate. You can't give all your energy to something and push against it and hate it unless it's within you. Because see, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And oh, what I would love for you to be indifferent about where I pee. Because you see, when I go pee in public in most states these days, I am breaking the law. I'm supposed to pee where my birth certificate says, which you know by now, genitals female, gender identity, gender queer. My genitals are female, my birth certificate says F, so I'm technically supposed to use the women's room. I've already explained that that's dangerous for me, but trust me, I would rather use the women's room, because men are gross. My God, men, why do you have to pee on everything? Seriously, I would think that that hole would be pretty big, and by now, most of you should have a lot of experience. So I'd rather pee in the women's room, but it's dangerous for me. So I break the law everywhere I go. And so I want you to know that if nothing else, I understand. See, I've been watching you legislate my life for over 35 years. And I have cussed you, and I have railed against you, and I have marched, and I have chanted, and I have curled up in a ball and sobbed with my friends about you legislating my life and focusing on my genitals. But when I was 14 years old, I hated my own guts so much that I called a radio station to say that all gay people should be shot. I used to say I wouldn't walk across the street to piss on a queer if they were on fire. That's how much I hated myself. So I know that it's not me that you're thinking about or threatened by necessarily, but I know that I can't hate you anymore. I can't push against you anymore. The only way that this is ever going to get solved is for me to love you. So I want you to know that I understand. I understand how good that silky camisole feels under your three-piece suit. I understand how good your ball sack feels in those satin ladies' panties. And when you're ready, I'll be here, we'll be here to forgive you and to love you and to help you learn to love yourself the way I finally love this big-clitted, no-titted lesbian with a beard. Real nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. I think it's time for some, before we get into some Q&A, if you would please give a similar round of applause to Stacy Hines. Stacy is not only an amazing interpreter that can keep up with my extemporaneous ass, he is also a very dear friend and one of my best buddies. So, thanks, Stacy. I love you. Also, before we get started, I do want to let you know that tomorrow is the last show here at the Art Center, and then I jump into rehearsals for another show that I'm going to be in Kansas City. I'm in a short play called The Logs, which is a midst of a group of plays called Alphabet Soup that will be put on by Whim Productions. That we open April 12th in Kansas City. There's flyers outside that you can get for that show, and I hope I see you in Kansas City. And or you're welcome to get onto my mailing list if you'd like to know the things I'm up to. You can get on my mailing list, and I would love to have you be part of my community. So we have some questions, hopefully, from the box. Dun, dun, dun. Thank you, Cliff. Cliff has pulled out. Okay. You are awesome. Where can I follow you? That's a very easy one. I can do that right now. Right there. Thank you for saying I'm awesome, and I appreciate that you'd like to follow me, and please do. I'm not that good at social media, but I'm out there. So you can follow me all over the social media, and I don't do the X or the Twitter, either of those, but I do have Instagram and Facebook, and I'm always around town too. So sometimes I'm at the tap room. I don't know. Don't follow me there. That will look weird. Okay. So, what was everything you felt or thought about when you came out for the first time? Whew, that's a good question. Everything I thought about. Well, I can't. When we come out, we have to come out over and over and over again, because we may come out to one person and the next person. So my siblings were the first people that were the safest people to come out to. And then I came out, I was here in Lawrence, I came out to a group of women who I hung out with. But the one I vividly remember the most is when I came out to my mom, because I was 19 years old, and I was all into women's spaces and my, lesbian herstory and all these things. And so I sat down with Mom, and I said, Mom, I just want you to know that I'm a lesbian. And she said, what makes you think you are? So this is not the time to tell your mom you're really into eating pussy. I got cleared. So then I tried to tell her it's women's energy, Mom, and all this. It was bad. I have lost friends. I lost my high school friends. I've lost college friends coming out. I've lost people, and so it just kind of depends on who I'm coming out to and the situation. But I will tell you that most people, and I am a very blessed human being, that most people sometimes are a little weirdly curious, but most people are lovely. I don't really have people fight me. And so I'm very blessed by that, and mostly I feel scared to come out to somebody, and then I just do it. And now I've done it so much that it's like, turn on a faucet. It's just easy for me. But I've come out a million times, so there's that question. So those are my questions here. That's all I've got. So how about the audience? Cliff has a mic, and we'd love to hear your questions if any of you have any. What you think? There's one right there.
Hi, thank you.
Sure.
I think I want to begin by thanking you for helping me to understand my child better. My child is identified as non-binary since they were 6, and they're 9 now. And I'm getting emotional. Is that what this thing is for? I might have some questions about public speaking later as a life coach.
I'm hiring. I'm taking clients. So.
Okay, great. Yeah, I know one of your clients. She's really sexy, and her birthday's tomorrow. Um, yeah, my question is, and I don't know that you can have an answer for this, but I definitely feel after this experience with you tonight that I want to do better at supporting them and being in environments where they're not just around the het norm and the she-he, because they definitely stand out even in this community. But I'm curious about the idea, so codependency is coming up for me around, they are very frequently misgendered in both directions, and they don't love it, and I ask them if they want to say anything, and they don't.
Right.
And so there's the codependent question that you're probably feeling into already is do I tell people? Do I do it for them? Or just, keep saying, when you're ready, you can do it.
Well, I would ask them if they want you to do it for them.
Yeah, so far it's pretty closed mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure, I would hope that you have a group of friends and folks that they are never misgendered around.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important piece. And then for sure, get involved in Rainbow Kids and Families and make sure they're around other kids like them.
That's a local thing, Rainbow Kids.
Yes, and they have a table up there.
Great.
They have a table out there. They were here when you first came in, but they're very local and they're really involved, and it's a powerful organization. And every time I have a trans or non-binary human come out to me, the very first thing I want to do is get them involved in community with people that are their age.
Yeah.
Because there is something about, even I know that there's a bigger trans community here, but in my world, I've got me, Stacy, my Briss Elliott, my pal, I've got 4 of us that are like my age, because it's different. It's different depending on how old you are. So if you can get them involved with other kids that are like them that are their age, that's when they're going to feel at home more than any place else.
Cool. Maybe that's why they're asking to go to public school now.
Maybe. That's possible, for
Thank
sure.
you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely.
you.
And bless you.
You too.
There's a hand over here.
Well, I thank you for saying what you just said, because I relate to that very much. I'm the mama of an almost 14-year-old who, from a very young age, started presenting differently from gender assigned at birth and started having a very strong voice, and it was something that I was not prepared for. I had 2 boys, and I was so excited to have a little girl, and I drenched her in pink and hair bows and glitter, and at a very young age, she said no, and said, I don't want dresses, and I don't want hair bows. And the first experience I had with that was walking into the Gap that we used to have here in Lawrence that was very gendered, like boy clothes on this side, girl clothes on this side. And my child was 5 years old and said, I don't like the stuff on this side. I want the stuff on this side. And as a mama, I was like, well, that's the boy side. You're a girl. This is the girl stuff. And my child, who knew his self, said, I want these clothes. So I have learned along the way, and Jay, you've been a huge inspiration for me and our family. And what's an interesting development in our family in the last few years is my child, who very firmly was like, I'm a he, I'm a boy, just in the last year or so has started saying, I don't know how I feel about gender, I'm an it. And we adults who are supporting and loving our kid were like, no, you can't be an it. You're not an it. You're a human. No, that's dehumanizing. And our kid was like, fuck it, basically. Like, I don't care about a label of a he or him or what. Like, screw it. I'm a human. I'm an it. And our kid was like, I'm okay with being called it. And so I think it's been harder for us with all of that. But what we've learned in supporting and loving our child is pronouns really don't matter in the sense that like they matter if it's important and respectful to someone, but also we've learned that the language, like, we can honor our beautiful human without a gender label. Like,
yes.
It's become just this fabulous new journey, and we challenge ourselves to honor our child's wishes, but also just be each other and not gender everything, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
thank you, Jay.
Absolutely.
Like,
Thank
such
you.
an inspiration,
Thank you for saying
and
that.
we appreciate you so much.
You bet. Thank you. Other thoughts, questions? Time for one more. There's somebody up there, it looks like. Yeah, I gotta run all the way up there.
I think so. Yeah, it's on. So, as somebody who, I don't have kids myself, but when I'm out in the community interacting with kids, we'll run into kids where I accidentally mess up and misgender them, and then it's like, how do I reel it in? Because they're so young, the interaction that you have with them could be very scarring and very traumatizing to them. Do you have any suggestions for how to reel that in? I know you said just say sorry. Is the same thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
and move on quick, like, because we don't want that much attention on us.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's more like, sorry, I'll get that right next time. Move on.
Makes complete sense.
Rather, and then making a big thing about it, for sure. I want to just touch base on something that you said, because one of the things that, I am in menopause, so I miss cues, brain fog, come on. And one of the things I didn't say that I really want to say is that one of the things I hope you leave here with is the knowing and understanding that, guys, for example, you're better at turning that wrench, because when you went to turn that wrench, somebody cared enough to let you explore and play with that. They never said, you can't do that because you're a boy, right? So it's like if all of us could understand that we all have different interests, we have things that we're good at and things that we're better at, and it has literally nothing to do with your genitals. Nothing. Nothing. Really. And if we could all get that, you all would have way more self-expression, right? You'd have permission to be way more expressed. And that is my vision for the future, and your kid is leading the way in that. So, thank you. All right. And one last question? No? Yes? Looks like we got one.
I'm not quite sure how to ask this. I'm curious about something. So as I identify as male, and I understand that I have a set of tools that I can use, and they're not very broad, but I can drop my voice if I want to be taken more seriously. I can stand up a little differently. I can walk a little differently. But I'm curious about your experience and what you consider your tools. They must be quite broad, having the array of experiences that you have. And how do you pay attention to and choose the ones you want to use in a situation?
Yeah, I'm trying to synthesize this all down into like a sentence. My goal in life always is to be loved and to be in this now moment. And as human beings, we're not usually very often. We're either out there in the future, worried about the future, or we're ruminating about the past. And so when I can be in this now moment, present with you, then I know the right one to drop on, because you and I are one in that moment. And so for me, gender life is a spiritual journey. And so I am blessed that I have the classic female training that I have had, and I'm also blessed that I've walked through the world being perceived as male, because I have a whole different insight into men that I would not have had I not had that experience. So I do my best to just be now here, and when I really am, then I know exactly what to say. And I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for coming again. There's information out there in the foyer. We have another show tomorrow at 2 o'clock. If you're not doing anything tomorrow afternoon, and either you can live stream it again or come back. I'd love to see you. So thank you again for attending the Gender Reveal Party.